If you are listening or watching, you want to recruit, retain, engage, and lead great talent. And doing each and all of those things requires new perspectives from you. So whether your interests are in one or all of those things, you are in the right place today. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you're listening to this podcast, you could have been with us live. Well, or you could be with us for future episodes live is probably a better way to say that on your favorite social media channel. And you can get access to that and updates about when those episodes take place by joining us on our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to do that. This episode is brought to you by our new book, The Long Distance Team, Designing a Team for Everyone's Success. You can learn more about the book and special offers related to it at longdistanceteambook.com. That's longdistanceteambook.com. And now I'm going to introduce our guest, and I will start by bringing her into the stream. There she is. Her name is Heather McGowan. She is our guest today, and Heather is a lot of things. She's a future of work strategist, a thought leader, a researcher, and an author, including being the co-author of the new book, The Empathy Advantage, Leading the Empowered Workplace. She is a sense maker, dot connector, deep thinker, and pattern matcher who sees things that others missed. And we're going to talk about some of those things today. She's transforming the mindsets of people and organizations around the globe with her message about how the next phase of work will focus on continuous learning and how we as leaders must shift to guide these learning expeditions. Heather, I'm glad you're here. Welcome.
Hey there. Thanks so much for having me, Kevin.
It is my pleasure to have you. We've got so much that we can talk about. We've got a lot of things in terms of our work that is connected and in common. So I'm ready for us to dive in. And again, if you're with us live and you've got questions or comments, make sure you add those and tell us hello and tell us where you're from as well. Heather, what led you to doing this kind of work? I mean, you didn't wake up when you were 6 and say, I'm going to be a future of work strategist. Like something led you here.
Yeah, I did used to joke to people that I saw an ad for a future work strategist and I had all the skills, so I applied. No, in reality, future work strategist is a completely made up title.
Of course it is.
Yeah, I was speaking and people were like, well, we need to call you something. So you need a title. And I tried out a bunch of them. And then a friend of mine went to one of those websites that said, pick something from column A, column B, column C. And we came up with future work strategist and it stuck. And now every once in a while I see somebody else listing themselves as a future work strategist on LinkedIn. And I'm like, okay, maybe you went to the same website we did. I started doing this honestly out of frustration. I was seeing, this was more than 10 years ago. So I've been doing the future work thing before that was really, colloquial. But the people who were out there speaking about the future were talking about how technology was going to enslave humans. Specifically, some people were saying, the second industrial revolution gave us the middle class and this fourth industrial revolution is going to give us the useless class. And I just found that so profoundly offensive because I think humans are capable of so much more than we're even possibly can comprehend. So I started explaining how humans are adapting to changes in society and technology and globalization, et cetera, and how we need to think about ourselves, our organizations, our systems of education, and certainly our leadership differently.
Okay. So since you are the future of work strategist, perhaps the original one, at least by moniker. So my question is this. So what is the future of work?
It's human. It's human. It's really a focus on how can we unleash as much human potential as possible, whether it's through how we raise our children, our systems of education, how we attract, retain, develop talent, how we organize the activities that we do, and how we lead folks. And it hasn't been that way. Humans have been a cost to contain in pursuit of something else. It's been keeping your labor costs down. It's been a sort of a suppression of human potential. And now I think we're on the other side of that. We're beginning to think about how do we maximize human potential?
So as an idea, and there's obviously some things sort of in economic theory that have changed over time that sort of lead us at least part of the way there. But from your perspective, using that description, how close are we?
Oh, we're way off. I mean, we've got lost Einsteins. I mean, you've got the predictor of your success is your zip code more than anything else, whether or not you're going to go to college, patent something, rise up. We've lost social mobility as the North Star in this country, which I think is probably our best invention. Our best invention ever was social mobility. It was unleashing human potential. I mean, like no matter where you were born, under what conditions, you could be master of the universe in the world of business or science or the arts, etc. And we've lost that. I mean, if you were, according to Raj Chetty at Harvard, if you were born in 1940, you had like a 90% chance of doing better than your parents. In 1980, it dropped to 50%. I mean, can you imagine what it is now? And I think we've been kind of backwards in our thinking on that.
So I guess, one of the things when I introduced you, I used some great descriptors, right? Like a pattern matcher, and that gets me thinking about trends. And so I'm curious. I think, like me, you're trying to step back and see things that maybe people in the midst of it aren't seeing.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some of the trends that we as leaders, I mean, this is the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, right? So we're all humans, but we're also leaders. What are some of the trends that you think we as leaders should be looking at and considering as we are doing our work and thinking about the future of work today?
Well, if we just look at the last 3 years we've been through, which has been a pandemic, we haven't processed that at all. We have not grieved the folks we've lost. We have not, adapted to some of the changes that have taken place in society. And so one of the things that's really smacking us in the face is the subtitle of the book, The Workforce is Now Empowered. Because what happened over the past 3 years is people said, okay, and I draw things. So my personal life was this smaller circle and I had agency over it. And my professional life was a bigger circle that cast a shadow over that smaller circle and I had no agency over it. And what happened during this pandemic as a matter of necessity is those two circles overlapped. They didn't become one, but they overlapped a lot. The
Right.
personal circle grew and the professional circle shrank till they became somewhat more aligned. And we had
Think MasterCard logo.
yeah, exactly, the MasterCard logo. And we had agency over both. And so folks are saying, okay, it's not about where we work, it's about where work fits in my life. What am I doing this for? There's so many moms out there who are like, I'm making $1 more an hour than I'm paying for my kids' childcare, and I'm not raising my kids, and I'm going to an office where I hate what I do, and I don't like the people. And so people, 53% of people who shifted jobs between 2021 and 2022 went into a completely new role or industry. That's good news. I think that's people working to their potential. So the big thing that's smacking us in the face is there's been a changed relationship between individuals and organizations. And some of it is this existential crisis. Some of it also is Gen Z coming online. They're 12, 13% of the workforce now. They'll be 30% before we know it. They've grown up in constant trauma, and they're not going to compromise their values when it comes to work. They're not going to check their values at the door and buy into the hustle culture. It's very clear. So what do we do in this scenario? Best thing to do is embrace it. If you can get people who want to make an impact in the world and that impact is aligned with what your organization does, that's nirvana. So it's an empowered workforce that we want to have engaged. They're going to be engaged on their terms. There has to be an agreement, but it's a different way of connecting to your workforce.
And so we'll get into what some of those things are here in a second. But before we do that, well, I've got another question for you. But Karina makes a comment. It's kind of a big picture question. I'll pose it to you and let you comment as you wish. With the economic situation looking sad for the U.S. for many years to come, with the rise of BRICS countries and our currency being devalued, what will become of work? Do you have anything you want to add to that on sort of the larger economic construct?
Yes. So we've been all waiting for the past 6 to 8 months for this recession. We're waiting for it. We're laying people off. We're getting ready for it. We're talking ourselves into it. And there are certainly conditions that the caller, the questioner just asked that are true. I mean, we are going to have some reshaping. We're going to have some slowdowns, but we're waiting for this cliff to fall. We're waiting for this hard landing. We're waiting, we're laying people off like lemmings. And if you look at David Pfeiffer's work, that layoffs really don't solve any problem. You You get rid of people, you pay severances, you have to hire contractors, and then you hire them back at more money. And during that time, you've traumatized the people you've laid off. You traumatized some of the people who stay. You traumatized some of the leaders who had to lay people off. You reduce productivity because you reduce engagement. But we're going in this hysteria about the economy, and nobody can explain to me where is this big cliff we're going to go off of. I mean, the banks that are closed, that was depositor panic. It wasn't a structural problem with those banks.
Yeah, no, and almost assuredly, maybe one a little more than the rest, but basically that's the case. So we're not really an economic show, but we took Karina's question. Happy to talk about that. I want to get back to what we're talking about, how the pandemic, if you will, has sort of shifted change into a higher gear, and we've all had this sort of common experience. Even people that continue to work in a workplace, right, actual place, we all have this new construct of what work is now, right? So what is the view? Speak to us as leaders from your research and your perspective about what is it that we need to know that our team members are thinking now. Like, what is their view? What is their perspective? What do we need to be hearing that we're not maybe hearing?
Okay. So leader in 2019, say fall 2019, the leader was an unquestioned expert, make a decision in certainty, could drive productivity with domination, fear, even humiliation. Worker was vying for the attention and praise of the leader. Peers were competitors. If you wanted people to, whether it was perform or learn and adapt, you did it with extrinsic pressure, punishments, threats, and rewards. That was the paradigm. And people were valued who worked a lot of hours, showed up in the office a lot of presenteeism, a lot of sacrifices. Fast forward to 2023, where we are today. A leader who makes decisions as an unquestioned expert is a liability. There's too much change. You most likely have people reporting to you of skills and knowledge you don't. So if you try to hide the things that you do not know, you're creating a real vulnerability in your organization. Most likely, not only do the people reporting to you have skills and knowledge you don't, they often have skills and knowledge that's unique to each other. So peers as competitors doesn't work because you don't get the collaborative effect that you need from different types of skills and knowledge. Driving productivity with domination, fear, and humiliation, huge backfire right now. That doesn't work anymore. The workforce is saying, and it's not about where they work, it's about where work fits in their lives and when they come into an office, why they come into office, the things that takes place there. So the whole presenteeism and sacrifices, I'm sorry, that's what made you a leader. That's not what's going to make the next leaders, and it's not what's going to inspire this population. So we've had almost 180-degree shift on what we need from leaders. And I say in the book that there are, basically 4 shifts. So mindset, you used to manage people and processes. Now you enable success. This is intentionally provocative. The teams work for you. You work for the teams now. They don't work for you. Culture. It used to be peers as competitors. You pit them against each other to vie for your attention. Now you need those peers to be collaborators because they often have unique skills and knowledge that you need them to collaborate on. Approach, extrinsic pressure, punishment, threats, and rewards will not get your folks to learn and adapt at the speed, scale, and scope we need. Will work. And then behavior, domination, and driving productivity is backfiring now. So now you need, how do I create effectiveness through inspiration, caring, love, and belonging? So that's a big shift in leadership. Big 4 shifts, really.
So we're like halfway through our conversation-ish, Heather. And I haven't talked to, although you just hinted at it. Why my camera's suddenly not wanting to work, but there we go.
Yeah, you're in the witness program there for a second.
You've hinted at it. No, I'll turn off all the lights. Then I'll look like I'm in witness protection. You've hinted at it, but we haven't used the E word, empathy. So right. You just hinted at it just a second ago when we talked about leadership behaviors. Why we're having this conversation, and there's more we're going to have, but why is the word empathy the sort of the key driver word in the title of the book? How does that connect to all of this?
Because when you go through the book, and it's written in 3 parts. It's the first is meet your new workforce, because it's not the one you left in 2018. Rethink your organization, because a combination of technology, churn in the market, and demand for collaboration means you structure work differently. And then these leadership shifts, which I just spoke about, you look at all the three things together, the only answer to really meet those moments is empathy. Empathy helps you understand your people more, helps you figure out how to intrinsically motivate them. Empathy helps you understand your customer more. Empathy helps you understand yourself more, because we're asking these leaders to make changes in behavior when they've been, the cheese was in a different place in the maze. I mean, you were rewarded for your sacrifice and your driving productivity and being an unquestioned expert. You have to have empathy for yourself, because all the things you were sold on to become a leader have shifted. And so you have to have empathy for yourself, as well as applying empathy to better understand not only your customers, but really your employees.
As you think about the four shifts that you described, the shift of mindset, culture, approach, and behavior, uh, this is an understandably impossible question to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Which one of the four do you find leaders having the most struggle with, and why?
The mindset shift, the idea that you work for the team, is really hard, because the behavioral shifts flow from the mindset shift, and the approach shift blows from the mindset, and the culture blows from the mind. It's really the mindset you got to start with, and that's hard for folks to wrap their head around. And I discovered, about a year ago, because I go and do talks all the time. That's what I do for a living, keynote speaker to corporate environments. Is I was getting some real pushback from some organizations, depending on the composition of the room, the industry they were in, and the drivers. So the more sort of older conservative industries were like, "Hey, wait a second! I sacrificed to be here. These kids today, and they're going soft, and isn't this woke, and all that, all those kind of other buzzwords." And I was like, "Yeah, I get it. I need to have empathy more for you when we talk about these things, so you can have empathy for yourself." Because these are really big shifts, and you were sold one thing and you got something else. But if you want to be successful right now in this workforce, I don't think there's another way. I don't think you can apply that 2019 mindset. I just don't think you can.
So if I'm a senior leader, or I'm responsible for learning and development, for example, in my organization, and I agree with your premise that that's the thing, that's the lever that we need to shift, which is empathy. But really, it's this mindset piece. What's your advice to organizations if they're nodding their heads? What should they do now?
Well, it depends. I mean, a lot of times I get the question like, "I get it and I believe you, but my boss doesn't." Or
Notice I didn't ask it that way, but yes, I've heard that question too.
I do that question a lot. And so it's sort of an elephant in the room. The other one is that, we say we're doing these things, but we're not really. Those are the kind of the two that, and I say to folks, well, if you believe them, what is your sphere of influence? What's your ability to make this tangible? Where can you experiment and say, I bought into the idea, so I tried to do this. I tried to run them, even simple as running a meeting differently. I did hear from one guy who ran a very large real estate group, and he said, I got demographic change. The young people now, he said young people who are coming in and are working for me are so different from the values that I had and what made me a successful leader, and I don't even know how to talk to them. And he shifted how he started his meetings. He asked more input from them. He asked open-ended questions. And he wrote to me after I had done a talk like 4 months prior, and he's like, "It's shifted my organization. I have engaged folks now. They tell me what they think. They're taking initiative because I'm encouraging them to, well, after we have conversations." And so it wasn't a monologue. It became more of a dialogue, and it was really working. So
Chris Dyer, who I've talked with Chris a number of times, written a number of books. I think he's been on the podcast, and everyone, if he has been, I've had other conversations with him in our virtual LeaderCon events. But if he's been on the podcast, I'll make sure we put a link to it in here. I just don't remember for sure. But one of the things that Chris and I have talked about, and he says that the easiest way to see organizational culture is by looking at meetings, and the fastest way to change it is through meetings. And so I love your example, because it's leader in action saying, here's something I can do. And even if I can't fix everybody's meetings and I can't change everything, I can change it here. I can change it for me. I can change it for our team. And I can start that right away, to your point. Since that has just now kind of come up, this idea of culture, like any other thoughts that you have about culture? And we could talk macro culture, like organizationally, or we could talk microculture, as we would describe it, more like with you as an individual leader. What are your thoughts on culture and how it's shifting, and what do we ought to be thinking about there?
Well, within your organization, the cultures that are dictated rarely work. So if you say our coach culture is a monologue and you either fit or you don't, that's actually a cult. If you say our culture is a dialogue, here are some of the things we believe, these are the impact we want to have in the world. But every person who comes into the organization is going to change the culture in some way. And you hire people to add and evolve your culture. So, because the end of the culture is the means to get the impact that you want to have in the world. So the culture is not a static thing, but it's an evolving thing, and it really should be a monologue, not a dialogue.
One of the big ideas um, of the book, and it was in the introduction that I gave for you as well, is the role of, or the value of learning
Mhm.
in a world that's changing, in workplaces that are changing, in work that is changing.
Mhm.
So, talk about the value of learning as a part of work itself. Talk
Yeah,
about that, because I think that's another thing that's continuing to change. I mean, we could have talked about that, and I know I have talked about that for a very long time, but I think that's more prescient now than ever.
yeah. That was a really big subject in my last book, which was the adaptation advantage, but it continues to be relevant. So we had this construct that it was basically you were educated, you had a career, you retired, and by design you died like 18 months later. I mean, that's how we picked retirement age back when we picked it. And that has changed to learning, leverage, longevity. So learning is doesn't imply an end state the way educated does. Leverage indicates that work and learning are a combined act, and longevity is a reality because we didn't plan for, save for, nor can we afford, 30-year retirement. Most of us, not even just financially, but socially and psychologically as well. So when it comes to learning being part of work, it used to be that people would go get, whether it was an undergraduate degree or something after high school, they entered your workforce as what I would call a deployable workforce. They had the skills and knowledge they needed to execute. And they might need a little refreshing over the course of 30, 40-year career. Now the rate of change is such, by the time they graduate, a lot of the skills and knowledge they've learned are irrelevant because they've been replaced by other things, sometimes as much as 50%. And then once they start work, it's changing. I mean, a lot of times you'll look to hire someone in an organization, and between the time you identified a need and you actually got need relief, which means you got somebody on board and they're working, that need has changed. So learning has to be an integral part of work. And it's learning in the flow of work. It's not going to take classes all the time. There's maybe some of that. It's going to be really learning in the flow of work. And we need to figure out how to hire people who have a propensity to do that, and we need to hire people with that expectation. One of the problems since this is a leadership podcast, is we don't have socialized for our leaders a comfort with saying those four scary words: I do not know. I do not know is the first step in learning. But we shun we shun people who say I don't know as leaders, and we need leaders who can say I don't know. Let's find out. And that's one of the ways to make learning part of work, is when your leader says, I don't know, let's find out, or something I don't know, which is most likely. Can you teach me? Can I teach you? I mean, these are real behavior changes in the organization that we
Yeah,
need.
and there's some things that neither of us can teach each other yet, because it is brand new, to your point
Right.
earlier, Heather. And I think thinking about making it an integral part of work, you said something, and you may have saw me nodding when you said it, about making it an expectation. So that, and I would take that one step further. We're going to make it an expectation of you and the work on our team to be a learner. Here's what that looks like. And oh, by the way, you're going to see me as your leader doing it too,
Mhm.
because I can make it an expectation. I can make it clear. I can give you resources. I can give you time. I can do all those things. But if I'm not doing it too, it ain't gonna happen. At least not broadly, right?
Right. And let's look at how superbly capable we are of doing it. If someone had told you in September 2019, now I've worked in academia, I built a college focused on innovation, I've worked in corporate, so I've worked in all the different sectors. If you had told me in academia that entire university was going to go online in 2 to 4 weeks, I would say never going to happen. If you had told me, this Fortune 10 company is going to send everybody home and everybody's going to be comfortable managing remote teams for some indefinite period of time, never would have believed it. But you know what? Outside of the industries we had to close down, things like travel, things like that, we had really good business continuity with a very unexpected catalytic change in a very short period of time. So when people say, well, we can't do that, look at what we've done.
Look what we did.
Look at what we did.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And so one of the things that we have to remember as leaders, and it relates to everything that you've said, and that is that we don't have all the answers, and our teams have the answers with us.
Yeah.
And the reality is, to figure out where we need to go next, we can't just forget the last 3 years. Like, we should never forget 3 years of any time in our life in terms of what we can learn from it, but certainly the last 3. Like, we have to say, even if we're an organization that's going to go largely back or mostly back or all back to the office, that part's somewhat irrelevant to this argument or to this conversation, is that there are things we learned that we've got to apply. And if we don't do that, we're doing ourselves a huge disservice as a business and as individuals.
As a society, we learn too much.
Yeah.
Learn too much to discard it. Yep.
So, Heather, before we start to wrap up, is there anything I didn't ask that you wish I would have?
No, this has been a great conversation.
There you go. So it's clear, as is almost always the case with our guests here. I'd like to say it's at least a little bit about the selection criteria, but it's almost always clear to anyone who's watching or listening that you love your work. And yet, work isn't everything. We've been talking about that a little bit. So what do you, Heather, do for fun?
I like to have people over and cook meals. I like to have my community is really important to me, my friends. And we watched the women's basketball game yesterday, which was pretty amazing. I had some friends over to do that. So that kind of thing. Simple stuff. Community.
Perfect. And so when you're not cooking and gathering with your community, what are you reading? Like, what have you read recently, or what are you reading now that people might be interested in knowing?
So I'm in the book just came out, so I'm doing a lot of podcasts, and I did a podcast called 3 Books with Neil, and I'm drawing a blank on his last name right now. And he asks you, what are the 3 really just books that stuck with you? All these years later, we've all read thousands of books, or many of us have. And so I gave him,
not everybody. Let's be clear.
All right. So I gave him my 3 books, and one of the books was out of print. I had read it like 20 years ago, and he tracked it down and got me a copy of it, shipped it to my house, and I got it the other day. And the book is called The Day They Shook the Plum Tree, and it's about a woman named Hetty Green who lived in the late 1800s to early 1900s. She grew up in New Bedford, Mass, and then in New York City. When she died, she was the richest woman in the world. She bailed out New York City, and I think it was 1905, and nobody knows her name. And the reason I like the book is because my family's from New Bedford. My dad grew up there. So it's got a lot of like local history. But it's
The Day They Shook the what?
Plum Tree.
Plum Tree.
Plum Tree. It was written in the 1950s. And it's just one of those examples of how many really interesting stories of people who had profound impact of how we work and live today that we just don't, like, kind of hidden figures that we just never hear about. And everything that's written about Hetty Green, they called her the Witch of Wall Street. She was a Quaker. She believed in being, very frugal, and she donated her money when she died. Her estate doesn't exist anymore because she donated in every direction, and she built out New York City. But you hear about Carnegie and you hear about Mellon, and she was running around with those guys, but you'd never hear about Hetty Green. So
there you go. The Day They Shook the Plum Tree. If we can find a link to it, everybody, we'll put that in the show notes for you, as we always do, along with the link to Heather and Chris Shipley's new book, The Empathy Advantage: Leading an Empowered Workforce. Where can we learn more about Heather, your work, the book, etc.? Where do you want to point people?
So I have a very active LinkedIn community, and that is where I learn. So find me on LinkedIn. I probably have these glasses, or maybe one of 300 other bears that I wear. But join me, because I learned from you folks. You send articles to me, you tag me in things. I love it. I'll tag you in things. And then for more information about me and speaking and all that, it's heathermcgowan.com. Right
there on the screen. If you're watching, heathermcgowan.com, or find her, follow her, connect with her on LinkedIn. I hope that you'll do that. So now, everybody, I have a question for all of you who are watching and listening, whether it's live or whether it's later. The question is the same. Now what? What are you going to do as a result of this conversation? What action are you going to take? Are you going to change something about the way you run your meetings? Are you going to ask yourself some different questions? Are you going to work to be a little more empathetic with your team? Are you going to be more willing to say those 4 words, I do not know? What is it from this conversation are you going to take and act on? Because if you don't act, sort of what was the point? And if you do act, things will start to change for you and your team. I hope that you will do that. I'm going to continue to bring you folks that can help you think about the world of work and the world of leading differently so that we can get different and better results moving forward. Heather, thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to have you.
This is a pleasure.
And everybody, so that's what we do here every week. So I hope you'll come back. I hope that you will subscribe or follow or do whatever happens on whatever podcast medium that you use. But most of all, I hope that you will refer it to someone else. Send someone else our way to listen and learn from us another week on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everyone.